Welcome to the deep dive. Have you ever wondered what the two biggest forces are reshaping the modern world of business and management today?
It's a huge question.
It is. We've got a stack of sources right here, articles, research, different insights. And our mission today is really to unpack the complexities, the core ideas, the history, and crucially, the different perspectives on these two massive interconnected trends, all just for you.
That's right. On one side, we have digital transformation and technology, and on the other, globalization and cross-cultural management. Now, they might seem like completely separate conversations at first glance.
Yeah, you might think that.
But our sources really show they're deeply woven together. Each one is kind of accelerating and shaping the other.
Absolutely. So our goal in this deep dive is to give you that essential understanding of both, pulling out what's most important if you're navigating or, just trying to understand the modern business landscape.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's jump right in. Let's start by really unpacking digital transformation and technology. What is it fundamentally?
So at its heart, digital transformation isn't just about buying new software or getting the latest gadgets.
Right, not just shiny new toys.
No, exactly. It's integrating digital technology into every part of a business. The goal is to fundamentally change how the organization actually works and how it creates value for its customers.
Right. So it's a total rethink. It's about leveraging these incredible new tools and the sheer volume of data they generate to dramatically improve efficiency, maybe create amazing customer experiences, and build entirely new business models that just weren't possible before.
Precisely. And there are several big ideas driving this. You can think about technological integration first.
Okay.
That's weaving digital tech deep into the daily operations and how you interact with customers.
Right.
Then there's data-driven decision-making. Look, we've always used data, right?
Sure.
But now it's about using really sophisticated analytics to guide almost every strategic choice and track the outcomes.
And I imagine a huge focus is always on the customer experience.
Absolutely. Enhancing it through, slick digital channels, really personalizing interactions based on that data we just mentioned.
Right.
Yes, and this fuels business model innovation using these new digital capabilities to invent entirely new ways to generate revenue or deliver value to the market.
But maybe the trickiest bit and the most critical piece, according to the sources, is the cultural change that's required.
You nailed it. It's fostering a true digital-first mindset throughout the whole organization, one that genuinely encourages innovation, experimentation, even accepting some failure along the way.
Okay, so we see tangible examples of this all around us, right? Every day.
Oh, definitely. Just look at the massive shift to e-commerce. It's transformed retail from, mostly physical stores to huge online platforms.
Huge shift.
Or automation using tech to streamline processes, often cutting costs dramatically in manufacturing, logistics, even office work.
And artificial intelligence seems to be everywhere now.
It really is. Applied in everything from predicting what you might want to buy online to detecting financial fraud or even powering those customer service chatbots you interact with.
Right. And the Internet of Things, IoT.
Yeah, IoT. That's connecting physical devices, could be anything from your smart thermostat at home to complex factory equipment, connecting them to the internet to collect vast amounts of data, enable remote monitoring, control. It's huge.
And cloud computing. That seems to have totally changed the game for businesses.
Yeah. Absolutely revolutionized how businesses handle their information, moving away from, expensive, clunky local servers.
Yeah, the old server rooms.
Exactly. To renting powerful computing resources and data storage over the internet from providers like AWS, Amazon Web Services, or Microsoft Azure.
So while all this feels very modern, very cutting edge, digital transformation actually has quite a history, doesn't it? It's been building for decades.
It really has. The sources trace it back to the early stages, the 1950s through 70s. Think huge mainframe computers used mostly by governments and large institutions.
Right.
Followed by the very first early personal computers starting to appear, but still quite niche.
Then came the real personal computer revolution, like in the 80s and 90s.
Exactly. Bringing mass adoption into homes and offices. That led to widespread software development, word processors, spreadsheets, databases.
The tools we still use, basically.
Fundamentally, yes. And of course, the dawn of the internet in the 90s, connecting everything up.
Which then powered the rise of e-commerce through the late 90s and 2000s. Remember the dot-com boom?
Oh, yeah. Survived that. And e-commerce just kept growing, changing how we shop forever.
Then the mobile revolution, maybe 2000s, 2010s.
putting computing power and connectivity right in everyone's pocket with smartphones and tablets. That led to the explosion of mobile apps that changed, well, pretty much daily life and business interaction.
And that brought us squarely into the cloud computing era from the 2010s to now.
Right. Which in turn enabled powerful data analytics on a scale that was never before possible.
And now, where are we now?
Well, now we are firmly in what you could call the age of artificial intelligence and automation. Machine learning is becoming incredibly sophisticated, and automation is impacting more and more industries.
So the key insight from tracing that history,
it's that digital transformation is this ongoing, constantly evolving process. The sources really emphasize that it requires continuous adaptation. You can't just do digital transformation and be finished.
Right. It never stops.
Yeah.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting and practical, I think. Let's look at Amazon. Their journey seems like a classic case study of this whole process in action.
Oh, absolutely. They started as just an online bookseller, remember?
I do.
And transformed into this global giant spanning e-commerce, cloud services, digital streaming, entertainment. The list goes on.
So how did they do it? What were the key digital moves?
Well, Amazon really shows what's possible when you embed digital technology right into your core DNA. Their e-commerce platform wasn't just a website, it was a fundamental rethinking of online shopping. They prioritized, vast selection, competitive pricing, and sheer convenience above all else.
And maybe their most transformative move, looking back, was creating Amazon Web Services, AWS.
Arguably, yes. They built this massive, incredibly robust cloud infrastructure for their own needs first.
Right, for the retail side.
Exactly. Then they realized other companies desperately needed this kind of scalable, reliable infrastructure too, so they started renting it out. AWS became the leading cloud platform globally, essentially providing the engine for other companies' digital transformations. It's kind of amazing.
It really is. And what about Amazon Prime?
Another brilliant move, bundling digital services like streaming video and music, plus faster, often free shipping, into a subscription. It wasn't just a loyalty program, it used data and digital access to create immense customer stickiness and, crucially, a predictable recurring revenue stream.
And they were early pioneers in using artificial intelligence, weren't they?
Absolutely. For everything from those hyper-personalized product recommendations you see.
Yeah, sometimes spookily accurate.
Right. To sophisticated fraud detection behind the scenes, and even optimizing how robots and humans work together in their massive warehouses.
And underlying all of this,
relentless data analytics. They use data not just for monthly reports, but to drive minute by minute decisions and continuously optimize every single part of their business, from the supply chain right down to customer service interactions.
What did all this digital effort, this transformation, actually yield for them? The results?
Well, undeniable market leadership in multiple sectors, incredible diversification into high growth areas like cloud and advertising, huge operational efficiency from all that tech and automation, and that fiercely loyal customer experience we mentioned.
So Amazon's success really underscores the power of fully embracing technology and just constantly innovating your business model.
It really does. It shows how it can lead to dominant market positions.
Now, this whole digital shift isn't just about business processes and, profits. It has these profound impacts on society, even on our individual minds. And some key thinkers offer some pretty critical perspectives on this.
Indeed. The sources bring up several important voices. Nicholas Carr, for instance, in his book The Shallows, raises some serious concerns about the internet's effect on our brains.
How so?
He argues the constant distractions, the multitasking it encourages, leads to shallow thinking. It erodes our capacity for deep focus, for sustained critical thought. He talks about neuroplasticity, how the internet might be literally rewiring our brains, and he kind of laments what he sees as a decline of deep reading.
Interesting. And then there's Shoshana Zuboff and surveillance capitalism. That sounds ominous.
It is a critical perspective. Zuboff looks closely at the business models of many major tech companies. She argues they collect and monetize vast amounts of user data, not just to improve their services, but critically to predict and subtly manipulate our behavior for commercial gain.
Manipulate.
That's her argument. She calls this whole system surveillance capitalism. She also talks about the creation of an attention economy, where our focus itself is the commodity. And she warns this poses serious threats to individual autonomy, democracy, and freedom.
Wow. Heavy stuff. What about Yuval Noah Harari? He often looks at the big picture, the future.
Yes, particularly in Homo Deus. Harari takes a very long view of technology's potential future trajectory. He speculates that technology might paradoxically lead us towards an end of history by helping humanity overcome fundamental challenges like suffering, disease, maybe even death.
Okay.
He discusses the possibility of superintelligence, artificial intelligence dramatically surpassing human intellect, and even a hypothetical God algorithm that
Right.
could understand and predict human behavior better than we understand ourselves.
Which raises huge questions.
Huge questions about human purpose, meaning, and the potential emergence of a new kind of human, a Homo deus species, perhaps merged with technology. It's very speculative, of course, but thought-provoking.
Definitely. Then you have Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee with the second machine age.
Right. They compare the current era of AI and automation to the Industrial Revolution in terms of its potential economic and social upheaval. They're actually quite optimistic about the potential benefits overall, but they also highlight that the economic gains from technology can be highly concentrated, potentially worsening inequality. And they really explore the future of work, acknowledging both the real risks of job displacement and the potential for creating entirely new kinds of jobs and opportunities. It's a balanced look.
So mostly concerns or critiques. Are there more optimistic views in the sources?
Oh, yes, definitely. Clay Shirky, for example, in Cognitive Surplus, offers a much more optimistic perspective.
Yeah.
He argues the internet has unlocked this vast reservoir of human time and talent, our cognitive surplus that was previously consumed by passive leisure, like watching TV.
Right.
Now he argues that surplus can be channeled into collective creative projects, from Wikipedia to open source software. He emphasizes the power of collaboration the internet enables.
And the end of the amateur era.
Yeah, that's his phrase. The idea that anyone can now create and share content globally, breaking down old barriers between producers and consumers.
And Charles Leadbeater in We Think.
Leadbeater explores similar themes, focusing on the power of collective intelligence and crowdsourcing. He argues that groups, when properly structured and connected online, can often solve complex problems or make better decisions than individuals working alone. He draws on that idea of the wisdom of crowds to highlight new opportunities for collaboration and innovation.
So a real range of perspectives there, from deep concern to considerable optimism.
Exactly. These thinkers offer diverse, sometimes clashing, but always crucial frameworks for understanding the immense impact of digital transformation far beyond just, the company balance sheet.
Okay, so as powerful and transformative as this whole digital revolution is, the sources are pretty clear. It's not a magic bullet. It comes with significant challenges and criticisms.
Absolutely. That's a key theme. On the purely technological front, there are still huge hurdles. Think about infrastructure limitations, reliable, high-speed internet access just isn't universal, creating digital divides.
Yeah.
Security is a massive ongoing battle against cyber attacks, data breaches, ransomware. It's constant.
Yeah, you read about it every day.
And the sheer complexity of integrating shiny new digital systems with older, often clunky legacy technology that companies still rely on, that's a major headache and expense for many organizations.
Okay. And economically and socially.
Big implications there too. Automation can, and sometimes does, lead to job displacement, which can fuel inequality if new jobs aren't created or people can't retrain.
The digital divide you mentioned.
Yes, uneven access to technology and the skills needed to use it effectively can really exacerbate existing social and economic inequalities.
And privacy concerns seem huge.
Massive. Around how companies collect, use, share, and protect our personal data. It's a constant tension.
What about inside organization, the cultural side?
Implementing digital change is often really difficult internally. You frequently face resistance to change from employees who are maybe comfortable with the old ways or fear the new technology.
Understandable, perhaps.
Sure. And there's often a real lack of digital skills in the workforce, requiring massive investment in training and development, or struggling to hire the right talent.
And the overall company culture.
Sometimes the existing organizational culture itself is the biggest impediment, especially if it's resistant to change, risk-averse, or doesn't encourage experimentation. And yes, sometimes failure, which is part of innovation.
The sources also raise some broader ethical points, right?
Definitely. Concerns about bias in algorithms are significant. Unconscious human biases can get baked into the code.
How so?
Well, if the data used to train an AI reflects existing societal biases, the AI might perpetuate or even amplify them, leading to potentially unfair or discriminatory outcomes in areas like hiring, loan applications, even criminal justice.
Right.
There's also the broader ethical questions surrounding extensive data collection purely for commercial purposes. Lubov's surveillance capitalism idea. Is that fundamentally ethical?
A big question.
And the environmental impact. We don't always think about it, but producing billions of devices, powering massive data centers, and disposing of electronic waste has a substantial environmental footprint.
So the bottom line on digital transformation.
It offers incredible opportunities, no doubt, but the sources really underscore that navigating it successfully means being acutely aware of all these risks, technological, economic, social, ethical, and actively working to mitigate the potential negative consequences. It's not just about grabbing the benefits.
Okay, that gives us a really solid foundation on the digital side of things. Now let's broaden our view. While technology is transforming organizations internally, these same organizations are operating in a world that feels like it's shrinking, becoming more connected externally.
Exactly.
And that brings us neatly to our second major force, globalization and cross-cultural management.
Right. So globalization, in essence, is this increasing interconnectedness and interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, and societies.
What drives it?
It's driven by a mix of things. Technological advancements we've already touched on, communication, transport, trade liberalization policies, opening up borders to goods and services, and the easier movement of people and capital across those borders.
And cross-cultural management fits in how?
Well, it's the vital skill set, the whole field of study and practice needed to navigate this globalized world effectively. It's about managing people from different cultural backgrounds, which involves truly understanding, appreciating, and crucially, effectively working with individuals who might have very diverse values, beliefs, customs, communication styles, you name it.
So what's fascinating, as you said earlier, is how these two are so intertwined.
Absolutely. Globalization basically creates the need for cross-cultural understanding. Suddenly, cultural diversity in the workplace isn't just something happening out there between countries, it's an internal reality for many global companies.
Bringing opportunities and challenges.
Both. And it means cultural sensitivity, just being aware of and respectful of these differences, avoiding stereotypes, adapting how you communicate becomes non-negotiable for success.
This requires developing something called cultural intelligence, or CQ.
Exactly. Your ability to understand and effectively function, adapt, and navigate in different cultural contexts. It has cognitive, emotional, and behavioral aspects.
And it touches on global business ethics too.
Hugely important. Addressing how companies operate responsibly across borders, especially regarding things like labor practices, environmental impact, corporate social responsibility, when laws and norms vary so much.
Intercultural communication must be paramount then.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding not just the spoken language, but nonverbal cues, subtle nuances, different styles of negotiation or feedback. Being mindful to avoid costly misunderstandings.
And it must profoundly impact human resource management.
Definitely, in a global context. Think about managing talent across borders. How do you recruit, train, compensate fairly, manage performance evaluations, navigate diverse labor laws and cultural expectations around work-life balance, hierarchy, things like that? It gets complex fast.
And of course, a foundational tool here, mentioned in the sources, is Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions Framework.
Yes, Geert Hofstede's work. It provides a useful, though sometimes criticized, framework for thinking about national cultural differences across key dimensions like power distance, how inequality is accepted, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, assertiveness versus nurturing values, uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation. It gives managers a starting vocabulary.
So, like digital transformation, globalization isn't just a recent thing either. It has a long history.
Far from it. The sources point to early globalization dating way back to ancient civilizations. Think extensive trade routes like the Silk Road connecting East and West. And later, the colonial era, which created these vast interconnected global empires, albeit through force.
Modern globalization really kicked off with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, driven by breakthroughs in transport, steamships, railways, and mass production, which boosted international trade significantly.
And then a big acceleration after World War II.
Absolutely. International institutions like the Bretton Woods organizations, World Bank, IMF, the UN, and later the GATT and WTO, were specifically created to promote global economic integration and prevent future conflicts, partly through trade.
And the technological revolution we discussed earlier just poured fuel on the fire.
Totally. The internet, Modern telecommunications, container shipping, cheaper air travel all dramatically accelerated the pace and scale of globalization in recent decades, making real-time global collaboration and complex supply chains possible.
And alongside this, the field of cross-cultural management evolved.
Concurrently, yes. Early work by anthropologists and sociologists laid some theoretical groundwork. Then the practical need for international cooperation after World War II, and especially the later expansion of multinational corporations, highlighted its real-world importance.
Hofstede's research in the 70s was a big moment.
A landmark, yes, provided that widely used framework. Then you saw the rise of global business schools teaching these concepts, the growth of emerging markets like China and India becoming major economic players, demanding more cross-cultural savvy.
And now digital globalization.
Right. The internet and social media are accelerating not just business, but cultural exchange, communication, the flow of ideas, both good and bad, across borders at incredible speed.
So the key insight here is really that globalization and cross-cultural management aren't separate topics.
No, they are inextricably linked forces shaping the modern business world. Understanding those cultural differences is absolutely critical for navigating the opportunities and managing the challenges of operating globally today.
Okay, let's maybe look at some of the leading voices who have offered different perspectives on globalization itself. The sources mention a few key thinkers.
Yes, from an economic standpoint, you have someone like Thomas Friedman. He famously argued in The World is Flat that various technological and geopolitical shifts have essentially leveled the playing field for global competition and collaboration.
His 10 flatteners.
Exactly. He outlines his 10-force model, pointing to things like the fall of the Berlin Wall, the rise of Windows, the internet browser, outsourcing, offshoring, sophisticated supply chains, search engines like Google, mobile tech. All these forces, he argued, made the world more interconnected and competitive for individuals and companies everywhere.
But there are strong critiques of that view, right? Like Joseph Stiglitz.
Oh, very much so. Stiglitz, a Nobel laureate in economics, offers a powerful critique in globalization and its discontents. He focuses on how globalization has been managed, particularly by powerful international institutions like the World Bank and the IMF.
What's his main argument?
He argues they often impose a kind of one-size-fits-all set of free market policies, sometimes called the Washington Consensus. Things like privatization, deregulation, austerity on developing countries, often as conditions for loans.
And the result?
He contends this frequently led to economic hardship, increased inequality, financial crises, and a loss of national sovereignty and control over economic policy, rather than the promised shared prosperity. It's a critique of the implementation of globalization.
Okay, shifting to a more political focus. The sources mention John Ruggie.
Yes, John Ruggie's work on the governance of globalization is important. He examines how global governance itself is evolving, moving beyond just interactions between states. He talks about the post-World War II era's embedded liberalism, which tried to balance free trade with allowing states room for social welfare policies.
And how has it changed?
He highlights what he calls the new governance, where non-state actors, multinational corporations, NGOs, civil society groups play increasingly important roles in setting global rules, norms, and standards. Think about corporate codes of conduct or environmental agreements. He's also closely associated with the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, the Protect, Respect, and Remedy framework.
Interesting. And James Rosenau, Governance Without Government.
Rosenau looks at the sheer complexity of governing in a world that's simultaneously more interconnected and more fragmented. He highlights the growing influence of these non-state actors and networks, suggesting that governance is increasingly multi-level. Meaning it happens at global, regional, national, and local levels all at once, often without a traditional central government authority pulling all the strings. Think about how issues like climate change or pandemics require cooperation across all these levels and involve businesses and citizens, not just governments. He talks about transnational governance for these cross-border problems.
So again, really different lenses on these global forces.
Absolutely. These thinkers provide vital and sometimes clashing perspectives on the economic and political forces shaping globalization and the huge challenges of managing or governing a world that is both more connected and potentially more fragile and complex.
Okay, theory's great, but let's make it concrete again. Let's turn to a case study that the sources mention, one that beautifully illustrates navigating these global and cultural complexities. IKEA.
Ah, yes, IKEA. A fantastic example, really, of a company that has expanded globally by paying pretty close attention to cultural nuances alongside maintaining their strong core business model and brand identity.
So how do they manage that balance? What are they doing right according to the sources?
Well, they practice significant cultural adaptation and localization, even while keeping that distinct IKEA feel. For instance, product customization. They adjust their product offerings in different markets. The sources mention designing, for example, smaller furniture pieces, specifically for the typically smaller homes in India, adapting to local living conditions and preferences, rather than just selling the exact same things everywhere.
Makes sense. What about the stores themselves? They feel pretty similar globally.
They do maintain a consistent overall store design and layout, which is part of their brand, but they also consciously integrate local elements, maybe in the cafeteria food or community engagement activities, to make the stores feel more connected to the specific community they serve.
And their marketing.
Critically, they adapt their marketing and communication. They don't just translate ads. They might use local celebrities, like in China, or tailor campaigns to resonate with local cultural values and holidays to make their brand message connect better.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing, right? They've faced challenges and learned lessons.
Oh, definitely. Language barriers are an obvious ongoing challenge in any global operation, requiring constant investment in translation services and multilingual staff training.
And cultural missteps.
Yes, cultural differences have led to mistakes. The sources mentioned a past controversy where a version of their catalog for Saudi Arabia digitally removed women from images that featured them in other countries. This caused criticism for appearing to bend too far, perhaps, and not navigating the cultural sensitivity appropriately. They learned from that.
And the logistics must be mind-boggling.
Managing their vast global supply chain, sourcing materials, manufacturing, shipping products across dozens of countries with different regulations, labor practices, logistical hurdles is incredibly complex. It requires really robust systems, constant monitoring, and continuous learning and adaptation.
So what are the key takeaways from IKEA's experience, according to the sources?
Several powerful lessons for any company looking to expand internationally. First, cultural sensitivity isn't just nice to have, it's fundamental. Second, localization, adapting products, marketing, even some operations is essential for market acceptance. Third, effective global supply chain management is absolutely vital for efficiency, cost control, and managing risk. And finally, continuous learning is paramount. You have to keep learning about evolving global markets, changing cultural norms, and adapting your strategies accordingly. IKEA's success really demonstrates the power of navigating these complexities effectively, even with occasional stumbles.
Okay, so we've seen the opportunities and the strategies for success in globalization. But let's make sure we cover the other side too, the criticisms and limitations. Because just like digital transformation, the sources are clear that globalization is a complex phenomenon with some significant downsides.
Absolutely critical to acknowledge that it's not all positive. Economically, there are widespread concerns about job loss and potentially increased inequality in developed nations as manufacturing and even service jobs sometimes move to countries with lower labor costs.
And the impact on workers in those developing nations.
That's another major concern, the potential for exploitation of workers, with issues around low wages, poor working conditions, and weak enforcement of labor laws in some parts of the global supply chain.
And for countries overall.
Countries can become overly dependent on foreign markets for selling their goods or for essential imports, making their economies vulnerable to global economic shocks or trade disputes.
What about culturally? Are there downsides?
Yes, there are significant fears about the homogenization of cultures. As dominant global, often Western consumer brands, media, and values spread, there's a concern it could lead to a loss of local traditions, languages, and cultural distinctiveness around the world, a kind of cultural flattening.
And environmentally, globalization must have an impact there.
A huge impact. It contributes to increased pollution and resource depletion through the expansion of industrial activity worldwide and the massive transportation of goods across oceans and continents.
Connecting directly to climate change.
Directly. The carbon emissions from shipping, aviation, and the whole global consumer life cycle driven by globalization are major contributors to climate change.
Politically, what are the concerns?
Some argue globalization can lead to an erosion of national sovereignty, as countries feel pressure to comply with international trade rules or the demands of global financial markets, potentially limiting their policy choices.
And power imbalances.
Yes, it can exacerbate existing power imbalances between wealthier, more developed nations and less developed ones within international negotiations and the global economic system.
So, broader limitations overall.
The sources point out that globalization often fails to benefit everyone equally. Marginalized groups within countries might be left behind, potentially increasing inequality and exclusion. It also presents huge challenges of governance and regulation. International rules often lag behind the pace of global economic activity.
Eating too.
Potentially numerous unintended consequences, anything from social unrest fueled by economic disruption to financial instability spreading quickly across borders to the environmental degradation we've mentioned.
And one of the sources specifically highlights the critical perspective of Vandana Shiva, particularly regarding the global food system.
Yes, her work, for instance, in Stolen Harvest, offers a powerful critique from an environmental and social justice perspective. She argues that the global food system has been effectively hijacked, as she puts it, by powerful corporations and allied governments, leading to significant harm.
Such as?
She points to massive biodiversity loss caused by the industrial promotion of monocultures, vast fields of single crops, and genetically engineered seeds, displacing traditional diverse farming systems.
She talks about food sovereignty.
Yes. She champions food sovereignty, the fundamental right of peoples to control their own food systems, to define their own agricultural policies, rather than being dictated to by global market forces or corporations. She sees this as essential for both food security and cultural preservation.
And corporate capture.
That's another key theme, her concern that a small number of multinational agribusiness corporations exert excessive control over key parts of the food system, from seeds and chemicals to processing and distribution, often disadvantaging small farmers.
She also critiques the ecological footprint.
Yes, the enormous environmental impact of the industrial food system, its reliance on fossil fuels, chemical inputs, long-distance transport. And she strongly advocates for farmers' rights, including the fundamental right for farmers to save, replant, and share seeds, and to maintain control over their own land, which she argues is undermined by certain intellectual property regimes promoted through globalization.
So her work really provides a strong counter-narrative.
It does. It underscores that globalization, particularly in sectors like agriculture, is a deeply complex force with very real negative consequences for many people and the environment. It demands careful consideration and policies aimed at ensuring benefits are shared more equitably and harm is actively mitigated rather than just accepting it as an inevitable or universally positive force.
Okay, so we've really taken a deep dive here.
Mm-hmm.
We've explored digital transformation and technology, its history, its key ideas, the different thinkers analyzing its impact, both positive and negative, and the very real challenges and critiques.
We covered a lot there.
And then we delved into globalization and cross-cultural management, understanding how the world is becoming more connected, why that cultural understanding is so vital, heard from key thinkers shaping our understanding of these global forces, and looked at the successes but also the stumbles of companies like IKEA navigating this complex world.
Right. Bringing in those case studies helps make it tangible.
We saw Amazon's, almost relentless mastery of digital transformation driving innovation, and IKEA's careful navigation of global cultural complexities as key examples of dealing with these forces.
And crucially, we made sure to highlight the significant criticisms and limitations associated with both of these powerful trends, drawing directly from the sources we reviewed. Neither is a simple story.
No, definitely not. So the core takeaway here, if we synthesize everything we've looked at from the sources,
I think it's that navigating this incredibly dynamic environment requires effective management that truly understands both the technological and the global forces at play. They aren't separate silos.
But it's more than just understanding.
Oh, yes. Crucially, this understanding must be paired with a deep commitment to navigating the associated challenges. That includes dealing with potential ethical pitfalls we discussed, cultivating genuine cultural sensitivity and intelligence, and committing to continuous learning in a world that just won't stop changing.
Exactly. So managers and organizations that are going to be successful in this landscape won't just be the ones chasing the next flashy tech or the next untapped global market.
Right.
They'll need to be adaptable, yes, forward-thinking, certainly, but also operate with a really strong sense of responsibility towards people, their employees, their customers, communities, and towards the planet.
These aren't separate issues anymore, if they ever were. They are fundamentally interconnected forces reshaping pretty much everything you interact with in the business world and beyond.
Yeah.
And that leaves us, perhaps, with this final thought for you, the listener, to consider. As technology continues its relentless advance and the world becomes, if anything, even more deeply interconnected, what responsibility do organizations and the managers and leaders who run them actually have to ensure that the immense potential benefits of these powerful forces, digital tech, globalization, are shared more equitably across different cultures and societies?
And
At the same time, actively working to mitigate those potential downsides, the risks, the harms that we've discussed today.
That is a lot to think about. A really important question to end on.
It is.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.